Have you ever witnessed an act of extreme racism that made your blood boil? What if one moment of hatred leads to an unexpected and life-changing twist that no one could have predicted? It was a warm, sunny afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The houses stood neatly lined up, each one with well-kept lawns and pristine driveways. The day seemed ordinary enough, but at the front gate of one beautiful home, everything was about to change. A young black man, his clothes slightly disheveled from the nerves he couldn't shake, stood waiting outside the house. His eyes kept darting toward the door, hoping for his girlfriend to open it. But as time passed, the nerves began to show. He could hear the sounds of the family inside, chatter and the clinking of silverware. But he didn't know what to expect when the door opened. Suddenly, the door flung open, and there stood the father, the man who had made it clear to his daughter that she was never to date anyone beneath her. His towering figure seemed even more imposing as he stormed out toward the boy. His face was contorted in anger, veins popping at his neck. He took a few steps forward and locked eyes with the boy, and with that one cold look, it was clear that whatever hope the boy had of this being a peaceful visit was immediately dashed. Without warning, the father began verbally attacking him. His words were venomous, loaded with racial slurs and hatred. "What are you doing here?" he spat. "You think you're good enough for my daughter?" The slurs came faster now, with no regard for the boy's humanity. The young man stood frozen, his heart pounding, trying to keep himself composed in the face of such cruelty. But the words were like poison, each one seeping deep into his soul. Then, without any further provocation, the father shoved him hard against the gate, his fists raised in fury. The boy stumbled but didn't retaliate. His body was pushed against the cold metal of the gate, but his mind stayed sharp, refusing to react to the abuse with violence. The father's anger only grew with the lack of resistance. The blows came faster now, each punch harder, each hit fueled by years of ingrained hatred. "You're nothing but trash," the father yelled, his breath ragged, his fists landing on the boy's body again and again. "You'll never be good enough for my daughter." Through all of it, the young man stood firm, not fighting back, but not backing down either. His face was bruised, but his eyes, though filled with pain, showed an unwavering determination. He wasn't going to stoop to this man's level. He wouldn't let this racist hate define him. Finally, the father delivered one last brutal blow before stepping back, his chest heaving with anger. "Get out of here," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "Leave my daughter alone. You're not welcome here." The boy didn't move immediately. His eyes, locked on the father's face, were filled with hurt and determination. His breath was shallow, his body aching from the beating, but he knew that his silence, his refusal to fight back, was saying more than any words could. He wasn't going to let this man break him. The father, assuming victory, turned his back on the boy, thinking the threat was over. But what the father didn't know, what neither of them could have predicted, was that this moment, the culmination of his blind hatred, was about to send them all on a life-changing journey. The boy had the strength to endure, but that very strength was about to spark an incredible transformation, one that would leave everyone stunned, even the father who thought he had the power to break him. Unbeknownst to the racist father, this was far from over. The boy's resolve would not only change the course of his own life, but would challenge the very foundation of the hatred that had been passed down to him. The girl, hearing the commotion from inside, had already come rushing to the door. She had witnessed the entire ordeal, her father's cruelty, the violence, the hate. And in that moment, her view of her father began to shift. The man she had once seen as her protector, now showing her a side of himself that she could no longer ignore. The boy, still bruised but unbroken, turned and walked away. He knew this wasn't over. The moment he had endured was just the beginning. He would return, and he would make sure his voice, his resilience, would be heard. The change he would create would be one not of violence, but of change through strength, resilience, and the simple act of standing tall in the face of hate. The next chapter of his journey had just begun, and it would not just change him, it would change everything. The boy's story begins with a long journey of struggle, determination, and resilience. Raised by his immigrant mother, he learned the value of hard work from an early age. His mother had come to this country with nothing but a dream of a better life for her son. She worked long hours in low-paying jobs, often sacrificing her own comfort and well-being to ensure that he had the opportunities she never did. It wasn't easy, but it was this drive that shaped the young man, instilling in him the belief that he could achieve anything through hard work and perseverance. Growing up, the boy faced constant challenges. He dealt with systemic racism in schools, on the streets, and even within his own community. Despite this, he remained focused on his goal of building a better future for himself and his family. He earned a scholarship to a prestigious university, a testament to his intelligence and determination. Every day, he pushed through the racial biases he encountered, finding strength in his love for his girlfriend, who shared his dreams of a future without the constraints of prejudice. While his life was far from easy, the boy held on to the belief that love could transcend the societal boundaries placed in his path. His relationship with his girlfriend was a beacon of hope for him, reminding him that despite the obstacles they both faced, love was still something pure and powerful. They dreamed of a future where they could build a life together without fear of judgment or hatred. The boy often thought of the way his mother had worked so hard to provide for him, and how, through sheer determination, he had come this far. This kept him going, even in the face of adversity. But as much as the boy worked to rise above the barriers placed before him, he found himself constantly reminded of the harsh realities of the world. It was during one of these moments, standing in front of his girlfriend's house, hoping to be accepted by her family, that he would face one of his greatest challenges yet. Her father, a man in his early 50s, was everything the boy had been taught to fear. Raised in an environment steeped in racial superiority, the father had never questioned the belief that his own race was above others. He came from a family whose values were rooted in white privilege and racial prejudice, a legacy that had been passed down for generations. To him, the idea of his daughter dating a black man was not just unsettling, it was an affront to everything he held dear. The father had always been the unquestioned authority in the family, controlling every aspect of his daughter's life. He viewed his power as a tool to protect what he believed was rightfully his family, his honor, and his legacy. His controlling nature and violent tendencies had created a toxic environment at home, one where his daughter's choices were always scrutinized, and anyone she chose to love was seen through the lens of his deep-seated hatred. His hatred for the boy was not just personal. It was driven by an irrational, unfounded belief that his daughter's love for someone of a different race threatened the foundation of his life. It wasn't just about disliking the boy. It was about seeing his very existence as a challenge to the worldview the father had built for himself. The boy's ambition, intelligence, and love for his daughter struck a nerve with the father in a way that nothing else could. To the father, this wasn't just a personal issue. It was about power, control, and the preservation of his family's legacy. He saw the boy as a symbol of everything he feared, and this fear manifested in a deep resentment that had only grown stronger over time. The boy's success, his love for his daughter, and his refusal to bow to the prejudices of society were all threats in the father's eyes. He viewed this relationship as a direct challenge to his authority and control. But what the father didn't realize was that the boy, despite all the obstacles he had faced, was more than capable of rising above the hate. The boy was not defined by the color of his skin or by the racial prejudices that surrounded him. He was defined by his resilience, his determination, and his love for the woman he wanted to spend his life with. He was ready to confront the father's hatred head-on, not with anger, but with the strength of a love that transcended everything the father had ever believed. The clash between the boy and the father was inevitable. The father's deeply ingrained racism and the boy's unwavering resolve would soon collide in a way neither could have predicted. Neither was prepared for the life-changing twist that was about to unfold. The confrontation between the boy and the father grew increasingly heated as the father's rage took control. The father, his face twisted with anger, took another step forward, towering over the young man. His eyes blazed with hate, but the boy stood his ground, trying to speak calmly and clearly. The boy wanted to explain that his love for the daughter wasn't a matter of rebellion or disrespect, but that he genuinely cared for her. But the father wouldn't listen. His mind was already made up, clouded by his deeply ingrained racial prejudices. The father's words came faster now, more venomous with each passing moment. "You don't belong here," he spat. "People like you have no place with my family. You're not worthy of her, and you never will be." The boy's heart clenched with each insult, but he refused to be intimidated. His love for the daughter was too strong to be swayed by this man's hatred. He tried to speak again, but the father was having none of it. In a sudden burst of violent anger, the father shoved the boy hard against the wall, causing him to stumble. The boy was blooded but unbowed. His shirt was torn, and his face bore the marks of the assault, but his eyes remained clear. Despite the humiliation and pain, the boy stood tall. The father's fury only seemed to fuel the boy's resolve. With a calm voice, the boy spoke through the pain. "You're wrong about me. I'll prove you wrong, but you'll never stop me from loving your daughter." His words echoed in the charged air, defiant yet composed. The father paused for a moment, his hand raised as if to strike again, but something in the boy's words gave him pause. For the first time, the father seemed to hesitate. The boy's dignity, his ability to stand firm in the face of such brutality, created a crack in the father's hardened exterior. It was the first time in years that someone, especially someone he perceived as beneath him, had not only stood up to him, but had done so with such strength and grace. But the pause was short-lived. His pride, his belief in his own superiority, quickly took over again. The father's sneer returned as he took a step back. "You'll never be good enough for her," he muttered under his breath, his tone colder than before. The father's world, where he had always been the one in control, had been briefly shaken. But his hatred and ego drowned out any recognition of his actions. The boy, despite the momentary crack in the father's resolve, knew the confrontation wasn't over. This wasn't just about proving a point to the father. It was about standing strong for something bigger than himself. As the father turned away, still muttering under his breath, the boy, battered but determined, watched him go. His heart was heavy with the injustice of the situation, but he refused to let the assault define him. He wasn't going to let this man's cruelty destroy his hope or his love for the daughter. With the confrontation behind him, the boy knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. He had proved to himself, at least, that no matter what the father did, he would not back down. He would fight for his love, for what he knew was right, no matter the cost. But deep inside, he knew that this wasn't just about him. It was about dismantling years of hatred and prejudice that had been perpetuated by the father's generation. The father's world of privilege and control had been challenged, even if only for a moment. But the damage had been done. The boy's unwavering stand against the hatred had planted a seed of doubt in the father's mind, and that seed would begin to grow in ways the father could never have anticipated. Whether the father realized it or not, the boy had already won. His strength, his resilience, and his unwavering love were all that mattered now. Later that week, the father received a letter that would change everything. He sat at his desk, sipping his coffee, unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. The letter seemed innocuous at first, a simple corporate update. But as he read through it, his face slowly drained of color. The letter was from one of his top business partners, detailing the success of a major deal that had just been secured. The deal was worth millions, and it was a breakthrough that promised significant growth for the father's company. But there was something in the letter that made the father's hand tremble. The letter named the key player in this deal, someone he never expected to see again, let alone in such a crucial role. The boy, the same young man he had assaulted just days before, the one he had humiliated and attacked outside his home. The boy who had come to stand in front of him, battered and bruised, yet unbroken. The boy who had quietly shown him what true strength meant. It was this very boy who had been instrumental in securing the deal that now promised to change the course of the father's business. The revelation hit like a ton of bricks. The boy, whose intelligence and professional acumen the father had completely dismissed, had been working behind the scenes. While the father had been busy wallowing in his ignorance and prejudice, the boy had quietly and efficiently worked on a major business project that had now brought in millions for the company. The father's face flushed with a mixture of disbelief and shame as he reread the letter. But that wasn't all. The letter also mentioned that the boy, who had quietly earned the company's respect with his work ethic and strategic thinking, wanted to meet the father personally. He had arranged a meeting at an upcoming corporate function where he would discuss the future of the project and how he could contribute to further expansion. The boy, in his quiet dignity, had not only proven his worth, but had also reached out to the man who had mistreated him, offering a chance to collaborate professionally. The father, now fully aware of the boy's significance in this deal, felt his stomach tighten. His earlier contempt for the boy seemed almost laughable in light of the magnitude of what had just been revealed. The realization was overwhelming. The young man he had dismissed and brutalized was now the very person who had secured his company's future. The harsh words, the physical violence, and the pride he had taken in belittling the boy, all of it now seemed so trivial in comparison to the undeniable truth before him. The meeting at the corporate function was set for later that week, and the father arrived with a heavy heart. He had been preparing himself for this moment, but nothing could have prepared him for the boy's calm presence when they finally came face to face. The boy's demeanor hadn't changed. He was the same composed and dignified young man he had been when the father had beaten him on the street. "Mr. Davidson," the boy said, offering a firm handshake. His voice was steady and his gaze unwavering. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." The father, stunned, tried to hide the guilt rising in his chest. He shook the boy's hand, his eyes betraying the shock and regret that were beginning to surface. I didn't realize. I didn't know it was you," the father stammered, the words feeling inadequate. The boy nodded, understanding. "It's not about what happened in the past, Mr. Davidson. It's about the future now," he said with calm resolve. "I'm here to help your company grow, to continue what we started, and to build a future for everyone involved." For the first time, the father saw the boy not as someone beneath him, but as an equal, a capable, intelligent, and driven individual who had earned his place. The weight of his actions, the cruelty, the racism, the violence, was undeniable. But so was the opportunity for change. This moment, this encounter, would define the father's future as much as it did the boy's. As they sat down to discuss the next steps for the company, the father felt a profound shift in his heart. The boy, once a symbol of everything he had despised, was now a symbol of redemption. And in that moment, the father realized that true strength wasn't about belittling others or exerting power. It was about recognizing the value in every person, no matter their background. The father's eyes softened as he listened to the boy talk about the future. It was a new beginning for them both, one that would forever change their lives and the course of the company. And as they spoke, the father couldn't help but feel a quiet gratitude. He had learned a lesson that he would never forget. The father, now deeply ashamed of his actions, realized that his earlier behavior was not just a mistake. It was a reflection of everything he had been raised to believe. He had acted out of fear, ignorance, and a sense of superiority that had been ingrained in him for years. But now, sitting with the boy in front of him, he saw the consequences of his actions in a way that made him feel both regret and a desire for change. Reluctantly, he reached out to the boy, offering a somewhat awkward apology. The words were hard for him to say, but he knew they were necessary. "I was wrong," he muttered, his voice filled with discomfort. "What I did to you, that was unacceptable. I can't take it back, but I want to make things right." The boy, though still hurt by the father's earlier cruelty, looked at him with a quiet understanding. "Apology accepted," the boy said calmly. "But it's not just about words. True growth comes from humility, from understanding the hurt that's been caused, and from actually changing your actions. It's a start, but it's not enough." The boy stood firm in his position. He would not be silenced or forced to accept the kind of treatment the father had previously dished out. His love for his girlfriend, his unwavering belief in the importance of respect, and his drive to break down the barriers of prejudice all fueled his determination. But he wasn't content with just receiving an apology from the father. He wanted something deeper, something that would prevent such ignorance and hatred from spreading further. "I won't back down," the boy continued, his voice steady. "But I want you to understand that there's work to be done. If you truly want to make this right, then you need to take action. I'm asking you to undergo racial sensitivity training, and I want you to make a public apology, not just to me, but to anyone who's ever been hurt by your words and actions." The father's face tightened with discomfort at first. The idea of attending sensitivity training seemed foreign, an admission of guilt that he hadn't been ready to face. But he knew the boy was right. It wasn't enough to simply apologize. He needed to change, to confront his past actions, and to make amends in a meaningful way. It wasn't an easy decision, but the father agreed. He realized that this was his chance to prove that he was capable of growth, that he could look beyond his privilege and privilege-blind beliefs. It would take time, and the journey would be challenging. But the father knew that it was a necessary step if he was to truly change. Over the following weeks, the father began attending racial sensitivity training, slowly confronting the deep-seated biases that had controlled his life for so long. He also made his public apology, admitting his wrongs and acknowledging the harm he had caused. It was a humbling experience, but one that began to shift his perspective on race, power, and equality. As time passed, the relationship between the father and the boy improved, albeit slowly. The boy remained steadfast in his belief that people should not be judged based on the color of their skin. He showed the father, through both actions and words, that character and kindness were the true indicators of someone's worth. The father, over time, came to realize that the boy's dignity, intelligence, and strength were qualities that transcended his race. The boy had shown him a path toward change, and the father began to advocate for equality and justice, not just within his family, but in his community as well. His journey toward redemption wasn't easy, and it wasn't immediate. But with every step, the father began to dismantle the prejudice that had once defined his life. The boy's unwavering strength had sparked the change, and with time, the father grew into someone who could stand for justice and equality, hoping to pass down a legacy of compassion and understanding, instead of hatred. The boy's efforts to challenge prejudice, to break down the walls built by years of ignorance, led to broader discussions in the family and beyond. It wasn't just about changing one man's heart. It was about the transformation of an entire family and the possibilities for a more open and just society. The boy had shown everyone that love, respect, and humility were the true foundations of a better future. The boy's bravery, resilience, and unwavering composure not only earned the respect of the father, but also sparked something much larger. His ability to stand firm in the face of adversity, despite the physical and emotional pain he had endured, became a lesson to everyone who witnessed the confrontation. The father, once blinded by his deep-seated prejudices, began to see the boy in a new light, understanding that strength comes not from dominance, but from the courage to remain true to oneself, despite the hatred of others. As the boy continued his relationship with the daughter, their story began to ripple out into the wider community. The tale of how love had triumphed over hate, of how one young man's determination had shattered the walls built by years of racial intolerance, began to spread. People who had once viewed the boy through a lens of suspicion and bias started to open their eyes. They saw in his strength, his dignity, and his resolve the kind of character that could not be defined by skin color, background, or the prejudices of others. Neighbors, and even people who had once been skeptical of the couple's relationship, began to reflect on their own biases, questioning the assumptions they had made. This story, once marked by conflict and hate, had turned into a beacon of hope for others who were fighting similar battles. The boy's experience inspired not only his immediate family, but also the larger community, reminding them that love, when given the chance, could overcome even the most ingrained prejudice. As the story of their love and the father's transformation became known, more conversations around racism and family dynamics emerged. The community, once fragmented and divided by differences, began to recognize the importance of unity, respect, and love. People realized that breaking down the barriers between them required more than just acknowledgement. It required true change, deep reflection, and humility. And at the heart of it all was the young man whose integrity and character had changed the course of his own life and the lives of those around him. The final scene captured the essence of their journey. The boy, now holding the daughter's hand, walked alongside her, a symbol of love and strength. Her father, standing in the background, watched them walk together, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and humility. He had learned a valuable lesson, one that he would never forget. His daughter's love and the strength of the young man who had earned his respect had proven to him that change was possible. Their journey together was far from over, but the love between the boy and the girl had already triumphed over the prejudices that had once kept them apart. And the boy's strength, his resilience, and his integrity continued to inspire others. His story became one that others looked to in their own struggles against racism, reminding them that the battle was not won with violence, but with love, dignity, and the courage to stand tall against hate. You can break someone's body, but you can't break their spirit. And in the end, that's what matters.